Chapter 1: Transfer to Blackridge. The rain thrashed down in icy sheets, obscuring the view of the jagged cliffs that flanked the winding road. The prison van lurched forward, its tires groaning against the gravel as it approached the gates of Blackridge Penitentiary. The fortress loomed above the fog like a rotting cathedral, its towers cracked, its windows bricked, its history forgotten by most, but not by those who had survived it. Officer Marcus Heller sat stiffly in the passenger seat, squinting at the rusted sign swinging on creaking chains, Blackridge Penitentiary, estimated 1867, no admittance. The driver, a young recruit named Jensen, laughed nervously. "This place looks like Dracula's summer home." "Shut up and keep your eyes forward," Heller muttered, the unease already slithering into his gut. He had pulled overtime duty for this transfer, 3 inmates, maximum security, one-way trip. The Department of Corrections had reopened Blackridge for overflow. Budget cuts, they said. What they didn't say was why the place had been shut down for over 40 years in the first place. The van rolled up to the iron gates. A low buzzing hum broke the silence, and the gate slowly creaked open without a guard in sight. As they entered, the air seemed to grow heavier, the headlights barely cutting through the fog. Inside the prison courtyard, overgrown vines strangled the fence, and the watchtower light blinked sporadically like a dying eye. The van came to a stop. Heller stood and checked the chains on the 3 prisoners in the back. Through the steel mesh, he could see their eyes. Inmate number 1, Jackson Rook Rourke. A cult leader convicted of multiple ritualistic murders. Calm, quiet, always smiling. Inmate number 2, Carly Mays. A former nurse turned serial killer. Her hands twitched constantly, as if still holding an invisible scalpel. Inmate number 3, Terence Gibber Quinn. A wild-eyed man who claimed to hear the walls speak. He had been found eating drywall in his last cell block. 3 of the worst. They were escorted one by one into the prison by a silent intake team in grey uniforms. No names, no conversation, just icy efficiency. Jensen whispered, "Why don't they talk?" Heller didn't answer. He was too busy watching the hallway behind them, where he swore he saw something move in the shadows. Something tall. They were led to the central control room, where an elderly man waited, thin, pale, and dressed not in a uniform, but a dark coat that looked almost like a funeral director's. "I am Warden Greaves," the man said. His voice was thin and distant, like a needle skipping on an old record. "Welcome to Blackridge." Heller extended a hand, but Greaves ignored it. "Your presence here is temporary. The prison holds more than criminals. It holds history. Secrets. Don't wander. Don't speak to them unless you must." "Them?" Jensen asked. "The prisoners," Greaves said flatly, but Heller noticed his eyes dart to the walls. The tour was brief. The cell blocks were ancient, peeling walls, rusted bars, scratch marks deep in the concrete. But it wasn't just the decay. It was the silence. No sounds of footsteps, no intercom, no buzz of electricity. Just the dripping of unseen water and the occasional hollow creak of metal. That night, Heller took the first shift in the monitoring room. The feeds flickered with static. The cells were quiet. He leaned back, trying to shake the growing pressure in his chest, and that's when the alarm went off. Cell 9. Movement detected. He blinked at the monitor. Cell 9 was empty. No inmate had been placed there. It was supposed to be sealed. The footage showed something standing in the cell. Something tall. Gaunt. Head tilted. Heller stood up, grabbing his flashlight. Jensen looked up from a crossword puzzle. "You going to check that?" "Stay here," Heller said. "Radio if anything changes." The corridor to cell 9 was colder than the others, like something had leached the warmth from the concrete. The door stood open. That alone was impossible. The cells were sealed with triple lock mechanisms. Inside, the shadows shifted. Heller's beam cut through the darkness, landing on the far wall. He froze. There were fresh handprints smeared across the bricks. and in the center of the floor, something had been scratched into the stone. "Let me out! I never left." A whisper, so soft it almost wasn't sound, brushed against his ear. "You brought them here. It begins again." He spun around. No one. But the cell door slammed shut behind him. And the lights went out. Chapter 2, Cell 9 Doesn't Exist. The emergency flashlight crackled in Officer Heller's hands as he slammed against the iron door, now sealed tight. "Control, this is Heller. I'm locked in Cell 9. Respond." Static hissed in his earpiece. He tried again. "Jensen, come in. Radio check." Nothing. Just the low growl of silence. He turned, flashlight shaking in his grip, the beam darting across the cell walls. The crude message scratched into the stone was no illusion. "Let me out. I never left." But there was something else now, something new. A symbol etched beneath the text, one that hadn't been there before. A triangle with a vertical line through the center, surrounded by what looked like tally marks, 7 in total. Fresh. As if someone had just carved it. Heller crouched to examine it closer when the temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the inside of his breath. Then came the noise, or not a sound, but a sensation in his bones. A low vibration that made his teeth chatter. And then a whisper, soft but close. "Warden sees. Warden remembers." Heller staggered back as a hand brushed his neck. He swung the flashlight wildly. There was no one there. Suddenly, the radio clicked alive. "Lur. Heller, do you copy? What the hell happened?" Jensen's voice. "Cell 9. Heller barked. "I'm in Cell 9. Door sealed. Get the override." A pause. Then, "Sir, Cell 9 doesn't exist." "What are you talking about?" Heller's heart slammed in his chest. "I'm in it right now." "No, sir," Jensen replied, voice shaking. "I'm looking at the blueprints. The cells go from 8 to 10. 9 was sealed off after the fire." "Fire?" "Yeah. 1972. There was a hold on." Jensen's voice faded, followed by shuffling papers. Then silence again. Heller's flashlight flickered once, twice, then died completely. He was plunged into blackness. Seconds dragged. The air felt like it was thick with ash, like he was breathing through gauze. A smell filled the cell, burnt fabric, scorched metal, and blood. A scratching sound started near the floor. Then breathing. Not his. He didn't wait. He pounded the door with his fists. "Let me out! Open the damn door!" And then, as suddenly as it had locked, the door groaned open. He fell forward into the hallway, coughing, flashlight clattering to the ground. Jensen stood at the end of the corridor, eyes wide. "Sir, what the hell's going on? You've been gone for nearly 2 hours." "That's not possible," Heller gasped. "I was in there for 10 minutes, tops." "No. You left 10 minutes ago, and you just vanished from the cameras. We thought you were, sir. There's no Cell 9. Look." Jensen handed him the schematic. Sure enough, it was missing from the layout. But Heller had been there. He'd seen it. And more importantly, someone had been in there with him. Later that night, back in the control room, Heller reviewed the footage. He watched himself walk toward the hall that should lead to Cell 9, but in the recording, he vanished. One moment there, the next, gone. Like he stepped into thin air. Jensen paled. "What is this place?" "I don't know," Heller said, rubbing his face. "But we're not alone here." He didn't sleep that night. Elsewhere in the prison. Down in cell block D, Carly May sat on her bunk, humming softly. Her nails were blooded, though she hadn't been given anything sharp. She whispered to the air, "I hear you, little mice in the walls. I hear the gnawing. I know what's coming. Then she turned her head sharply, as if hearing someone speak, and smiled. Yes, Warden. I remember you. The next morning, the prison's mess hall, once abandoned, was opened for the first time in decades. Only 3 inmates, watched by a full guard detail. The grey-uniformed staff didn't speak. They stood like statues. Jensen leaned toward Hella, muttering, "They don't eat." What? The guards. The Black Ridge guys. I've been watching them. They just stand there. Nobody ever takes breaks. No rotation. It's like they're dead. Hella offered, half joking. But Jensen didn't laugh. That's when the power cut. Every light flickered out. From the far corner, Quinn, the drywall-eating inmate, started to laugh. Low and wheezing. Oh, it's starting. He's awake again. The Hollow Warden. He wants us back. Carly dropped her spoon. Rourke lifted his eyes and whispered, all part of the ritual. And Hella heard it again, just behind him. 7 marks. 7 keys. 7 returns. The nightmare had only just begun. Chapter 3, The First Key. The emergency lights bathed the mess hall in a harsh red glow. The atmosphere felt like blood had been spilled, not light. Officer Heller drew his baton, slowly scanning the room as a thick, inexplicable dread settled in his gut. Quinn's laughter hadn't stopped. It sputtered and coughed, turning guttural, almost inhuman. Jensen backed away from the inmate table, his voice a whisper. "Sir, listen." The prisoners were chanting. Rourke, Carly, and Quinn, each muttering different words, and yet somehow in unison. A harmony of chaos, a broken prayer. 7 seals undone. 7 eyes opened. Warden returns. Hollow soul. Hollow bone. Let the gate breathe again. Shut it. Hella shouted, slamming the baton on the table. All 3 fell instantly silent. Rourke looked up, calm and eerily polite. "Officer Heller, would you like to hear what's really happening here?" "I'd like you to shut your mouth." "Oh, but it's far too late for that," Rourke whispered. "You opened a door last night, didn't you? You saw cell 9. Heller froze. "How do you know that?" "I dreamed it," Rourke said with a grin. "We all did. Quinn even tasted the smoke, didn't you, Gibber?" Quinn giggled and wiped something invisible off his lips. "Like burnt honey and teeth." Carly smiled sweetly. "The Hollow Warden wants his chapel back." Jensen whispered, "We need backup. Now." But the radios were dead again. Back in the central control room, the monitors flickered. Footage glitched and distorted. Cells shifted, doors in the wrong place, hallways stretched too long, some blacked out completely. One camera, cell block C, showed something that made Hella's skin crawl. It wasn't a person. Not quite. A figure, draped in tattered black cloth, face obscured by a mask of rusted iron, stood motionless in the center of the hallway. Unmoving. Staring directly at the camera. Jensen recoiled. "Jesus! Who the hell is that?" "Rewind the footage," Heller said. They scrubbed back 10 minutes. The figure wasn't there. Then, frame by frame, it just appeared. No approach. No entrance. One frame empty, the next, there. And with every passing second of video, the figure moved 1 step forward. Slow. Deliberate. "Turn it off," Jensen said. But the screen wouldn't shut off. Instead, the figure raised its hand, long and skeletal, and placed 1 finger over its mouth. Shush. And then the screen cracked. That night, Heller wandered the administrative wing, unable to sleep. His head throbbed. Whispers followed him in every corridor. Warden sees. Warden knows. He opened a file drawer in the abandoned office wing and found something unusual. A black file marked only with the Roman numeral I. Inside was a photo of a man, gaunt, dressed in warden attire from the early 1900s, standing beside a bizarre object, a stone key, shaped like a spine, etched with the same symbol from cell 9. The triangle with the line. Beneath the photo, Warden Ephraim Greaves, keeper of the first key. Sealed 1913. Chapel relocated to sublevel 3. Greaves. The same name as the man who welcomed them when they arrived. But that was impossible. The Greaves they met was elderly, but not over 100 years old. The file also contained a map, hand-drawn, showing the original prison chapel, sealed beneath the east wing after a fire. Sublevel 3. Except the official blueprint showed only 2 sublevels. The chapel wasn't supposed to exist. Heller took the map, tucked it under his vest, and made his way down the east corridor. The hallway was rotting, old parts of the structure long forgotten. He passed rusted gurneys, collapsed beams, and waterlogged cells. Then he found it, a sealed elevator shaft, boarded over. He pried the boards loose. Inside, a ladder descended into blackness. As he climbed down, the air thickened, the smell of mildew and death choking his breath. It felt like descending into a lung, warm and wet. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a wide stone chamber, and there it was. The original prison chapel. Pews shattered. Walls scrawled in charcoal and dried blood. A collapsed altar with 7 rusted iron sconces. The same symbol carved repeatedly into the stone. And at the center of the altar, the first key. A long, bone-colored relic, cold to the touch. It pulsed slightly, like it was alive. Heller reached for it, and the room howled. Not with wind. With voices. Thousands of overlapping screams erupted from the walls. A wind slammed through the chamber, tossing him across the floor. But he held the key. And when he stood, something had changed. On his forearm, carved without a blade, was a single tally mark. Elsewhere. Rourke jolted awake in his cell, laughing. The first has been claimed. The game begins. Carly giggled and danced in place, tracing circles with her fingers. Quinn tore out a chunk of his own hair and said softly, 1 down. 6 to go. When they're all awake, the walls will fall. And back in the control room, the monitors came alive all at once. Every camera showed the chapel. And in the final frame, the masked figure. Closer now. Chapter 4, Sublevel 3 is breathing. The first key was heavier than it looked. Not in weight, but in presence, like holding it pulled at something behind the walls, behind reality. Heller cradled the bone-like relic in both hands, its grooves pulsing with faint red veins. The tally carved into his arm itched violently. He climbed back up the ladder from Sublevel 3 with urgency, his flashlight flickering the entire way. When he emerged into the east wing corridor, the air felt thicker. He paused, listening. The prison was breathing. Long, low exhalations echoed through the pipes. Slow inhales. Like the building was sleeping, or pretending to. Jensen nearly jumped out of his skin when Heller burst into the control room. "You were gone for 3 hours," he shouted. "Where the hell were you?" "I found it," Heller said, tossing the file folder and key on the desk. "The chapel. It's real. And it's not just some religious room, it's a sealed chamber. Ritualistic. Ancient. I don't think it was ever supposed to be uncovered." Jensen stared at the key. "What the hell is that made of?" "I don't know," Heller said. "But something tried to stop me from taking it." Jensen picked up the file. Greaves. That's the name of the current warden. Right, but this says he was the original warden, back in 1913. Jensen's voice dropped. "That's over 100 years ago." Heller nodded. "And I don't think he ever left." That night, the whispers turned to singing. Throughout the cell blocks, unseen voices hummed a dissonant lullaby. The prisoners stirred in their cells, moving in rhythm. Guards, the silent grey-uniformed ones, stood completely still, eyes glassy, as if listening to something distant. One of them began to bleed from the eyes. Another collapsed, mouth wide open, whispering a single word over and over. Return. Midnight. Heller couldn't sleep. He sat in the warden's office, the old one, sealed behind layers of dust and nailed planks. He had pried it open earlier that day. Inside, time hadn't moved. A desk, ancient leather-bound books, a phonograph, and a mirror, cracked, but clean of dust. He stared into it. His reflection stared back, then smiled. Heller recoiled. The face in the mirror still wore his own skin, but smiled wider. Eyes darker. The tally on its arm was 2. He only had 1. He smashed the mirror. And behind the shards, hidden in the wall, was another file. File 2. He opened it slowly. This one wasn't just a record, it was a journal. Key 2 hidden in the mortuary vaults beneath cell block E. The walls are shifting again. The guards have begun turning in their sleep. Their eyes vanish first, replaced by ash. The hollow warden speaks through dreams. He feeds through memory. He cannot die, only wait. 7 keys. 7 seals. 7 hosts. If they are found, he will breathe again. Beneath the final page was a photo of Warden Greaves again, but older. Skin cracked like porcelain. Eyes black pits. And beside him, a coffin sealed with iron. Carved on the lid, the same triangle symbol, but with 2 tally marks etched into the wood. The next day, Heller and Jensen made their way toward cell block E. Or tried to. Hallways had shifted. Corridors they had mapped yesterday now led to dead ends. Some walls were covered in fresh mold that pulsed like flesh. One hallway had simply collapsed inward, stone sucked into itself like a black hole. They eventually found a passageway not listed on any map. Behind a torn curtain of plastic sheeting, rusted stairs descended into the bowels of the prison. The walls here were covered in faded murals, not painted, but scratched. Scenes of rituals, circles of figures in cloaks, a central shape looming over them all, tall, faceless, hollow. The warden. At the bottom of the stairs, they found the mortuary. Cold lockers lined the walls. Some still sealed. Others gaping open like mouths. The temperature dropped instantly. Jensen shivered. We're not alone down here. Heller found the coffin from the photo. The symbol was unmistakable. As he pried open the iron seal, a voice echoed from inside the walls. Do not awaken what cannot forget. The lid slid open. Inside was not a body, but a nest of bones, small ones. Finger bones. Dozens. Arranged in the shape of an eye. And resting in the center. The second key. Smaller than the first. Jagged. Blackened. It throbbed like a heart in his palm. And just like before, the tally burned into Heller's skin, now too. Somewhere else in the prison, Rourke convulsed in his cell. Blood leaked from his eyes and mouth. When he stopped twitching, he stood up straight and smiled wider than he should have been able to. He spoke, but it wasn't his voice. He has taken the second. The warden smiles. The warden waits. Back in the control room, the monitors once again shifted. Every camera, even ones that were disconnected, now showed sub-level 3. This time, the chapel was filled. Dozens of inmates in chains stood around the altar, heads bowed. The masked figure stood at the center. Then one by one, they looked up at the camera. And the screen went black. Jensen, Heller said, gripping the second key, we're not here by accident. What do you mean? I think we were brought here. Chosen. This prison is alive. It has a purpose. And it's waking up. What are you going to do? Heller stared at the 2 keys in his hand, then at the files. Find the next 5. Chapter 5, The Room That Watches. The following morning came without sunlight. The sky above Blackridge remained thick with unmoving clouds, as if daylight had been locked out. No birds, no wind. Just the distant groan of metal and the whispered breath of stone. Inside the prison, the temperature dropped 5 degrees across all blocks. The walls wept moisture, and the air carried the stench of decay, old blood, mold, something ancient. Jensen hadn't slept. He sat in the control room clutching the map from File 2, tracing the hand-drawn routes with shaking fingers. The next locations labeled only as observation. No coordinates. Just a symbol, the eye. Hella stared at the cameras. Observation wing hasn't been used in decades. Last inspection said it was condemned. Everything in this place should be condemned, Jensen muttered. But Hella was already gearing up. 2 keys now hung from his belt, bone-white and blackened, pulsing like corrupted heartbeats. His arm bore 2 tally marks, each one deeper than before. They weren't just carved, they were branded. I'm going in. Jensen looked pale. You're going alone. Someone has to stay here and monitor the cams. If I don't come back, I'll burn the place down, Jensen said. Hella smiled faintly and disappeared into the corridor. The observation wing had no power. The emergency lights refused to work. Hella's flashlight barely reached past a few meters before the darkness seemed to absorb it. The wing was a relic of old surveillance methods, glass rooms, one-way mirrors, and miles of thick, archaic wiring. He passed a row of disused recording stations. Each one had cracked glass panels, reels of tape long tangled and shredded. A thick dust coated everything. But the feeling was that he was being watched. From behind the glass. From inside the walls. From the ceilings. But the cameras were off. The mirrors were opaque. And yet, he knew eyes were on him. At the far end of the hallway was a door labeled Room 0, Warden Access Only. He pushed it open. The interior looked untouched by time. Clean. Sterile. White tile. 1 table. 1 chair. 1 mirror that took up an entire wall. As he stepped forward, the door slammed shut. In the control room, Jensen lost his signal. Every camera went static. Then, slowly, the screens began to shift, not to black, but to mirrors. Reflections of the prison, inverted and wrong. Figures moved backward. Doors opened to reveal teeth. Cell bars twisted into arms. And on one screen, Room 0. Jensen leaned in. Hella? But Hella wasn't on the feed. Only his reflection. Inside Room 0, Hella stared into the mirror, but what stared back was not him. It wore his face. His uniform. His keys. But its eyes were hollow. It raised its hand when he did, but a full 3 seconds too late. The lights flickered. He stepped forward. The reflection did not. Hella's voice caught in his throat. What are you? The reflection grinned. And mouthed, third. The glass shattered. From the shards, a sharp object clattered to the floor, a key, jagged and razor-thin, made of some kind of clear crystal that distorted light. It vibrated violently in his hand. As soon as he picked it up, a 3rd tally seared into his arm, a burning pain unlike the others. This time, he screamed. Because this time, the mark didn't just burn the flesh, it went deeper. Into his memory. He suddenly saw the chapel again. But not empty. It was full of people chanting his name. He stood at the altar, not as a guard, but as a priest. As a warden. And in that moment, he remembered things he should not. The keys. The ritual. The deal. The Hollow Warden wasn't a person. It was a position. And he had once accepted it. In the prison chapel, the masked figure raised its arms. The altar cracked. From below it, a hand emerged. Pale. Dead. Twisted. The congregation of ghost prisoners bowed deeper. The warden was waking. Back in room 0, Hella collapsed to his knees, the third key humming in his hand. His eyes were bleeding. The door behind him opened slowly. And standing there was Warden Greaves. He hadn't aged a day. He smiled, gently. "You're remembering now." Hella gasped. "What am I?" "Chosen," Greaves said. "Like I was. Like the next one will be. You're doing well, Marcus. You're not real." Greaves reached down and stroked his cheek. "Neither is this place." And vanished into mist. Later, Hella returned to the control room. Jensen jumped to his feet. "Jesus! What happened to your eyes?" "They're fine," Hella muttered, though blood trickled from the corners. "I found it. The third key." Jensen stared in disbelief. 3? "You're halfway there." Hella didn't answer. He pulled the keys out, bone, black, and glass. They glowed faintly in sync. But now his face had changed. He looked older. Like something inside was aging faster than his body. He sat down and opened file 4. This one was blank, except for a single word. Blood. In the mess hall, Carly Mays carved tally marks into the table. Quinn muttered numbers in his sleep. "And Rourke?" Rourke stared into the ceiling and whispered, "The gate is open wide enough now. For we'll unlock it. But 5 will invite him through." Chapter 6, File 4, or the Blood Room. The word haunted the page. Blood. No map. No coordinates. Just that one word, written in red, smeared across the yellowing paper like it had been traced with a finger dipped in something still warm. As Hella stared at it, he swore the ink began to move, forming rivulets that snaked down the page like veins. The prison groaned. Jensen hovered over his shoulder. "What does it mean?" Hella didn't blink. "It means the fourth key isn't hidden. It's fed." The central water system of Blackridge had been dry for years. Pipes rusted, valves corroded. But recently, they'd noticed a foul leak dripping down the eastern walls. Reddish. Thick. Too thick. It wasn't water. Jensen traced the flow back to a maintenance corridor they hadn't yet explored, near the old infirmary wing, locked for over 30 years. No cameras worked there. No staff patrolled. They didn't even know it still existed. The infirmary. The doors opened with a low metallic shriek, the hinges shriveled with rust. The smell inside was unbearable: rot, copper, antiseptic, and something worse, something sickly sweet. Hella stepped through first, flashlight cutting across walls adorned with fading diagrams of human anatomy, peeling motivational posters. Recovery is possible. And blood stains. Old ones. New ones. The trail of thick red fluid oozed from beneath a steel door marked "Blood Processing, Authorized Personnel Only." Jensen gagged. What the hell does blood processing even mean in a prison? Hella didn't respond. He was staring at the wall beside the door. Etched into the brick, hidden behind grime, was the triangle symbol again. And now, for tally marks. He pushed the door open. The room beyond was not an operating room. It was a chamber. Round. Windowless. No medical tools. No lights. Only candles, fresh, still burning, though no one had entered in decades. The walls were lined with drains. The kind found in slaughterhouses. Chains hung from the ceiling, stained dark. In the center stood an altar. Stone. Wet. And laid atop it, naked, head covered by a black cloth, was a man. Still alive. Jensen stepped back. "We should call." But the man on the altar groaned. And then spoke. "Fourth must be taken." Hella approached slowly. "Who are you?" "Host," the man whispered. "Bound. Key is inside. Must bleed to feed him." Jensen panicked. "We're not cutting him open. That's insane." But Hella had already picked up the ritual knife lying next to the altar. The man moaned, in pleasure or pain, they couldn't tell, and his skin began to split on its own. Blood flowed upward, against gravity, forming patterns in the air. The walls pulsed. And from within the man's chest cavity, something rose. It floated there, dripping with red, a crimson key shaped like a human heart. Beating. Hella reached out. As soon as he touched it, blood from the drains erupted upward in jets, covering the room in a torrential downpour. Jensen screamed. Candles were extinguished. The man on the altar vanished, not died, simply ceased to exist. And then? Silence. Only the key remained. When Hella stepped back, the fourth tally mark burned into his arm, deeper than the others. He collapsed to his knees, vomiting red foam. Jensen pulled him upright. "We're done. We're getting out. Screw the other keys." Hella wiped his mouth. "I can't. I remember more now." The fourth opens the mouth of the warden. The fifth is the invitation. Back in the cell blocks, the inmates had gone eerily quiet. Carly was sewing together small dolls made from torn bedsheets and fingernails. Each one had a keyhole in its chest. Quinn was no longer speaking in English. And Rourke. Rourke sat with his eyes rolled back, whispering to something behind the mirror. In the control room, Jensen refused to sleep. The monitors were getting worse. Some now played memories, his childhood, distorted versions of Hella's past, warped versions of events that never happened. Every monitor now showed a tally counter in the top right corner. It read for 7. And under that? Gate opening, 57%. Jensen turned away and saw a fifth file lying on the desk. It hadn't been there before. He opened it. Inside was only a small envelope. No name. No label. He opened it carefully and found a photograph. It was of himself, tied to the chapel altar. Eyes removed. Mouth sewn shut. Behind him, Hella stood, cloaked in black, holding 7 keys. And behind Hella, the masked figure. No longer standing. Now crawling. Jensen dropped the photo. "We need to leave." But Hella had already picked up the 5th file. He was reading aloud now. His voice flat. Distant. Like a man reading his own eulogy. Key 5, found in the Echo Wing. Built to house prisoners who could hear the warden through walls. Sealed after every inmate clawed out their own ears. Still echoes. Still lives. Only one can enter. Must carry the blood of 4. Must leave something behind. Hella looked up at Jensen, his eyes dark. "I have to go alone." "No," Jensen said. "This ends now." Hella placed the 4 keys in his satchel. "No, it doesn't. It begins now." He stepped into the shadows of the hallway. And the prison door to Echo Wing opened on its own. Chapter 7, The Echo Wing. The Echo Wing had been sealed with steel plates welded across the entrance, according to the records. But when Hella arrived, he found the plates peeled back like ribbons of foil, the bolts strewn across the floor in neat little piles. A thin humming sound came from within. Not electrical, organic. Like a voice, stretched and slowed, repeating one long syllable. "Oh." Hella stepped through. The door shut behind him. Echo Wing was not like the rest of Blackridge. It had no symmetry. The halls twisted, literally. Floors became walls. Ceilings sloped sideways. Lights flickered in slow motion, casting strobe-like glimmers on peeling walls that were covered in messages. The warden hears. The walls never forget. Don't listen to yourself. There is no sound without blood. And beneath it all, the symbol, triangle with the vertical line, accompanied by 5 tally marks scrawled in human teeth. Hella's own marks itched. He turned a corner and froze. Ahead, a man stood motionless, facing the wall. His back was bloody, spine exposed in a series of surgical cuts that traced the symbol down his vertebrae. His head twitched slightly, side to side. "Are you?" Hella began. The man shrieked. A perfect recording of Hella's own voice. From just seconds earlier. The same tone, the same pitch, played back impossibly fast, and then echoed down the corridor in dozens of variations. "Are you? Are you? Are you? Are you?" The man collapsed, spasming. Blood poured from his ears. And then he crawled backward, spider-like, vanishing into a vent with a howl. The whispers returned. But now they had form. The hallway filled with sound. Hundreds of overlapping conversations, Hella's childhood, his first kill on duty, his mother's funeral, Jensen's fears, prisoners' screams, memories that were never his, all playing from unseen mouths in the walls. He clutched the fourth key, and the sounds receded slightly, as if recognizing his authority. He pressed forward. At the hallway's end was a room. Simple. Square. Concrete walls covered in soundproofing foam, all torn and shredded. A single chair sat in the center. A noose hung from the ceiling. Taped to the wall, a sign. "Sit. Remember. Offer." On the floor was a reel-to-reel recorder. Still spinning. Still alive. And in front of the chair a mirror. Not a normal one. This one reflected his thoughts. He looked into it and saw himself holding a key made of shadow. Then blood. Then bone. Then Jensen's face, hollowed, wearing his badge. A voice from behind the wall said, "If you want the fifth key, you must leave your name." "What does that mean?" Hella asked. The mirror showed his childhood home. Burning. Then his badge. Melting. Then the tally marks. All 7, already etched in. "I am Marcus Heller," he said aloud. The sound repeated. Over and over. Marcus Heller. Marcus Heller. Marcus Heller, Marcus Heller, Marcus Heller. Until the voice changed. Now it whispered, not anymore. The fifth key dropped from the ceiling on a cord made of human hair. It clinked at his feet. Black steel, bent into a twisted infinity symbol. Screaming faintly. He picked it up, and the fifth tally tore itself into his palm. This time, he felt something leave him. He blinked. And realized he no longer remembered his middle name. Or the sound of his own mother's voice. Back in the control room, Jensen jerked awake at the sound of alarms, but they weren't alarms. The monitors were all playing Hella's face, screaming silently, endlessly, mouthing. "Leave. Don't let me finish." The screen in the center now read. Keys, 5E7. Gate opening, 71%. Blood offered, sufficient. In the echo wing, Hella staggered back toward the entrance. The walls pulsed. Something was coming. A shape larger than the corridor, dragging its weight through stone and steel. Its voice was a chorus of old inmates, all screaming for release. He ran. Behind him, the walls collapsed. The door slammed shut as he burst through. He didn't stop until he returned to the central corridor. His vision blurred. Blood ran from his eyes, his ears, and now his mouth. The fifth key pulsed in his pocket. He felt hollow. That night, Rourke was missing from his cell. Carly had painted her walls with blood from her own tongue. Quinn had written the name Amarcus 1,000 times across his arms. And in the chapel, the masked figure was now standing behind the altar. Arms raised. Eyes glowing through the iron mask. And somewhere beneath the prison, the true warden shifted. Only 2 keys remained. Chapter 8, Rourke's Gift. The cell was empty. Rourke, cult leader, murderer, manipulator, was gone. No sign of escape. No signs of struggle. The lock was unbroken, the cell sealed from the outside. But the security footage showed otherwise. Jensen rewound the tape again and again. There it was. At 3:13 a.m., Rourke stood from his bed, looked directly at the camera, smiled. Then he walked backward into the wall and vanished. No glitch. No trick. He simply passed through it, as if the wall had invited him in. Heller sat silent in the control room, blood dried beneath his eyes, the fifth key resting in front of him. Where did he go? Jensen asked. He's been waiting, Heller muttered. Since the beginning. He was never just an inmate. He was a disciple. Of the warden. No, Heller said. Of me. Jensen looked at him like he'd been struck. What? Heller held up his marked arm, 5 deep tally scars now, all twitching slightly beneath the skin like veins trying to escape. I told you I remember more after each key. When I unlocked the 5th, I saw something. Rourke was in the original congregation. Back when you were the warden, Jensen said flatly. Heller nodded. Not this version of me. Another life. Another cycle. I performed the binding ritual. And Rourke was my left hand. You're not making sense. Neither is this place. They found a 6th file beneath Heller's pillow. Not on paper. Not in an envelope. Carved into flesh. 5 words deep into the meat of his back. Jensen had to photograph it in pieces to make sense of the message. 6th key lies in Rourke. Not with him. In him. They returned to his cell. The wall where Rourke vanished was marked now. Not carved. Not painted. Branded. An enormous eye, cracked and bloodshot, bulged outward from the cement like it was trying to emerge. Heller placed the 5th key against it. The wall opened. No groan. No smoke. It simply opened, like a door cut into meat. And inside was not a hallway. It was a cathedral. The cult hall. Ceilingless. Endless. Floating in a void of ash. Hundreds of figures knelt in rows of pews made from prison beds and broken bone. At the altar stood Rourke, eyes blazing, arms outstretched. Welcome back, Warden, he said. Shall we complete the hymn? Heller stepped forward. You hid the key. No, Rourke whispered. I became it. He tore his shirt open. Across his chest, brands in the shape of the symbol burned like fire, triangle, vertical line, now 6 tally marks. You left me here, Rourke hissed. You promised ascension. Instead, I rotted in a cage. Until the walls taught me that the cage was the altar. Where is it? Heller asked. Rourke smiled. Then plunged his own hand into his chest. Blood sprayed. The congregation gasped in unison, a single breath, thousands of throats. Rourke pulled something out, not an object, but a vein of light, red and white, pulsing in rhythm. The 6th key. He held it forward. Take it, Warden. Claim your penance. Heller stepped up, hand out. Rourke dropped the key. But Heller caught something else instead, a vision. A memory that wasn't a memory. He saw himself, younger, performing the ritual that first bound the Hollow Warden. Saw Rourke beside him. Saw the 7th key being sealed into the foundation of Blackridge itself. The only way to retrieve it was to bring the others together. And then he saw Jensen, lying on the chapel floor, bleeding, open, 7 keys embedded in his body. Heller staggered backward, the 6th key burning in his palm. Rourke fell to his knees, smiling. You're almost ready. And then dissolved into a pile of ash. The cathedral vanished with him. Back in the prison. Jensen woke from a trance he didn't know he'd entered. The monitor screens were flickering again, all now marked 6-7. The progress bar read, Gate opening 88%. Host integration 92%. On one screen, he saw himself tied to the altar again. Only this time, he could hear it. His own voice. Screaming. Hella returned, bleeding and coughing violently. He collapsed against the wall. 6, he whispered. Only one left. Jensen crouched beside him. Then we leave. Get out of this place. Hella shook his head. The last key is already here. It's always been here. He opened the satchel and laid out the 6 keys. Each pulsed in a different color: bone white, blackened, glass, crimson, bent steel, and Rourke's light vein key. They began to vibrate in unison. The room shook. A final message appeared on the computer, in letters scrawled as if by claw. Chapter 9, the 7th key. Jensen backed away from the screen. No, he muttered. No, no, no. That's not. He turned to Hella, eyes wide, blood draining from his face. It's lying. It's lying, right? Hella didn't answer. He sat hunched in the control room's corner, staring at the 6 keys, now humming softly like tuning forks, vibrating in strange patterns, not random, but deliberate. Rhythmic. A language. Each time Jensen spoke, the crimson key glowed slightly, reacting to his voice. You knew, Jensen whispered. You saw it in the vision, didn't you? Me, on the altar. Hella finally looked up. His eyes were not fully human anymore. The whites were grey, the pupils slitted like cracks in a stone statue. 5 deep tally marks across his forearm. A 6th stretching across his neck. He didn't say yes. He didn't have to. The room grew cold. The lights dimmed. A humming filled the walls, deep and guttural. A presence pushing from behind the stone and steel. Jensen grabbed a chair and hurled it at the monitors. Screw this place. Screw your damn keys. But the screens didn't break. They absorbed the chair. It simply vanished on contact, pulled into black glass like water down a drain. Hella rose. Slowly. Every bone in his body audibly cracked. You don't understand, Jensen. I've tried to fight it. But the Hollow Warden doesn't take unwillingly. You're not thinking straight. The final key is made of choice, Hella said. That's the seal. One willing sacrifice. It completes the gate. Then find someone else. Hella took a step forward. I did. 6 times. None were enough. It has to be someone close to me. Someone who trusted me. Then it's not me, Jensen said, voice breaking. Because I don't trust you anymore. You still do, Hella said. That's why you haven't run. They both heard the door behind them click shut. The air changed. A low, rattling breath rolled through the vents, not like wind. Like lungs. Blackridge itself was preparing to inhale. Jensen stared at the keys. They were rearranging themselves on the table, forming a circle, with space in the center for the 7th. 1 slot. The final piece. I'm not going to die for this place, Jensen whispered. No, Hella replied, you're going to die for me. Jensen ran. He bolted from the control room, down the corridors, toward the exit, but the prison shifted. Every hallway stretched, bent. Doors closed. Lights flickered. And at every corner, a version of himself stood, pale, eyeless, bleeding, muttering things he hadn't said yet. It doesn't hurt if you breathe in. He was always going to choose you. The key is in your spine. Back in the control room, Hella stared at the final file. It was labeled only, Jensen. Inside was a single page. Do not mourn him. He was chosen before either of you were born. The warden's path cannot be altered. Only followed. Behind it, a photograph. Jensen, as a child, standing in front of Blackridge, long before it reopened. Wearing a visitor badge. Smiling. In the background, Greaves. Unaged. Watching. Jensen stumbled into the old chapel, the room now transformed beyond recognition. Pews carved from bone. Windows pulsing like wounds. Candles made from tongues. At the center stood the altar. Empty. Waiting. The masked figure stepped out from the shadows. It didn't move to attack. It knelt and pointed at Jensen's chest. The voice, thousands of voices, echoed in his head. You may choose to flee, but you were born to kneel. And from behind, Hela whispered, I'm sorry. The keys floated in a circle above the altar. Glowing. Spinning. Jensen turned, eyes filled with tears and fury. Finish it, then, he spat. If I was always meant to die for your sins, then do it. But know this, you won't survive it either. Hela looked down at his own arm. The 6th tally burned away, replaced by a 7th. It hadn't been Jensen. It had been him all along. The chapel shook violently. The floor cracked open. From the pit below, the hollow warden rose. It was not a man. It had never been a man. A towering silhouette of smoke, bone, and prison bars. Its mask twisted into infinity, each eye-hole opening to another cell, another scream, another life. It did not walk. It bled upward, pulling itself out of memory. The key shattered into dust. The seal broke. Jensen collapsed as the chapel vanished around him. There was no more prison. Only darkness. Only the warden. And Hela, now hollow, knelt before it, head bowed, whispering one final prayer in a language that had no words. Blackridge was empty by dawn. No records. No staff. No prisoners. Only a charred circle where the chapel once stood. And a single badge on the ground. Jensen. Chapter 10, The Prison That Walks. They came looking. 3 days after all communication with Blackridge ceased, the Department of Correction sent a recovery team. 5 men, 2 drones, and a priest from the Bureau's Occult Liaison Division. They never made it inside. Because Blackridge wasn't there anymore. The team stood where the gate once stood, on the cliff, high above the valley. Nothing remained. No structure. No rubble. Just a void. A space in the land that refused to be seen. Where GPS failed, compasses spun, and shadows crossed the ground in the wrong direction. One of the men vomited blood the moment he stepped beyond the original perimeter line. Another aged 12 years in 60 seconds. They set up camp 100 yards away. That night, they heard the bells. Inside the void, something moved. Blackridge still existed, but not in their world. It had been pulled inward, swallowed by the warden, transformed into its true shape. Not a building. Not a prison. A body. The warden was Blackridge now, its bones the corridors, its lungs the air ducts, its heart the chapel. It pulsed, floated, existed between seconds, half in memory, half in punishment. And in its hollow stomach. Jensen. He didn't die. Not fully. He awoke to an endless corridor, where the lights never blinked and the walls breathed in and out with agonizing patience. He was dressed in his guard uniform, but the name on his badge now read Warden. Hela's voice came over the intercom. But it wasn't a voice anymore. Just static rearranged into syllables. The key is continuity. You serve now. So others may forget. Above, on the outside, the Bureau launched drone surveillance. What they captured was impossible. One frame showed the empty field. The next, Blackridge, rebuilt. No transition. It simply was. But now the windows were wrong. The walls too tall. The watchtowers bent toward the ground like broken antennae. And someone stood at the gates. A figure in grey, wearing a mask. Waiting. When the drone zoomed in, it caught a flash of an ID badge under the cloak. Jensen. Inside, he wandered the halls alone, or so he thought. The cells were not empty. Each held a person he had failed. Old faces. Dead inmates. His brother. His mother. Even Rourke. All whispering in unison. You must remember what others forget. You must carry it now. One night, or what passed for night in this place, he stood in the chapel once again. But this time, the altar was empty. No keys. No congregation. Only a book. Bound in skin. He opened it. Every page was a memory of pain. Not his. Hella's. He saw Hella's past lives. The original warden, in 1867, cutting his own tongue out to prevent secrets from escaping. The second warden, burned alive in a riot. The third, driven mad by whispers in the plumbing. On and on, 7 lives, 7 sacrifices. And Jensen realized the awful truth. He wasn't the 7th key. He was the next warden. The hollow warden doesn't choose. It inherits. It consumes one to preserve the rest. And as long as someone takes up the role, the gate stays barely closed. But now the seal was fragile. Cracked. It needed more than memory. It needed faith. Jensen stood over the altar and screamed. Not in rage. In prayer. I accept it, he whispered. The lights dimmed. The mask descended from the ceiling, lowered by invisible chains. He placed it on. Outside, the sky above the vanished prison twisted into a spiral of cloud and lightning. And Blackridge, now reconstructed, reborn, was open once again. Accepting new inmates. And new keys. The world will forget. The world must forget. But the warden never does. He remembers all of them. Even you. Chapter 11, New Arrivals. The gates opened at 6 hours 66 minutes a.m. That should have been impossible. But time no longer obeyed laws at Blackridge. The sky above the prison had changed, no longer clouds, but something like static, flickering in waves, casting no light, no warmth. The ground trembled in slow, deliberate pulses, like a heartbeat no one wanted to hear. And down the winding gravel road came a transport van. Rusting. Empty. But still driving. Jensen stood at the gates. No longer dressed in corrections gear. Now he wore the warden's attire, a long grey coat with seams stitched by hand, the mask fastened to the side of his head. It whispered things when he didn't wear it. It screamed when he tried to take it off. He waited without speaking. The van rolled to a stop. Doors unlocked. And the first prisoner stepped out. Inmate number for 81, Myra Lil Lace. Convicted, none officially. Accused of killing 6 children in a summer camp fire in 2003. Evidence lost. Trial delayed 27 times. She walked free. But she never stopped smiling. As she stepped out, barefoot, in a simple white gown, her eyes met Jensen's, and she tilted her head. This place smells like prayers and rot, she said softly. Jensen said nothing. 2 more inmates followed. Inmate number for 82. Jonah Bell. Age, 73. Convicted, serial dismemberments. Confessed to 19 murders. But not his hands, he claimed something inside him used his body like a puppet. Multiple exorcisms failed. The last priest hung himself. Jonah walked with a cane made of ribs. Not his. Inmate number for 83, Evelyn Mart. Age, 19. Crime, none. She requested to be brought here. Voluntarily. No record. No ID. No fingerprints. She held a book bound in locks and chains. One of the locks was already open. Jensen led them inside. No guards. No lights. Only the pulsing hum of a prison that remembers. As the heavy doors shut behind them, a deep voice echoed through the stones. 3 have entered. 1 is worthy. 2 are keys. Jensen paused. He didn't ask questions anymore. He obeyed. They were taken to separate cell blocks, not according to design, but to fate. Blackridge decided where you belonged. Myra was placed in the north wing, the oldest part of the prison, where bricks whispered lullabies and rats bled from their eyes. Jonah was locked beneath the floorboards. His cell had no door, only chains that formed a prayer when stretched taut. And Evelyn was taken to room 0. She walked there on her own, smiling. That night, the warden dreamt. Jensen stood in the center of a maze. The prison unfolded endlessly, like intestines. At its center, a throne of bone. Hella sat on it. Still alive. Still bound. Why didn't you let me die? Jensen asked. You have died, Hella whispered. You're just too far inside to know it. And from behind the throne, the true warden emerged. Faceless. Vast. Wrapped in the cries of the guilty. It reached toward Jensen and marked him with the 8th tally. He woke screaming. The mask was on his face. He hadn't put it there. He couldn't take it off. His skin had begun to stitch into the seams. Elsewhere in the prison, Myra painted her cell walls in spit and ash. She sang to something she called the smokeless mother. Her lullaby cracked the glass in the hallway. Jonah spoke in multiple voices simultaneously. He wept when he was alone, and laughed when the ceiling bled. And Evelyn? Evelyn sat cross-legged in room 0. The mirror in front of her began to fracture. She leaned forward and whispered, I know what you really are, Warden. And I'm not afraid. Behind her, the chained book on the floor unlocked a second clasp. Jensen saw it all from the control room. And the monitors flickered with new data. Inmates, 3. Keys in formation, 2-7. Warden stability, 81%. Event, incursion, T, 72 hours. He had 72 hours. Before something else came through. Before the warden wouldn't just remember the past. It would rewrite it. Chapter 12, The Dead Return Differently. The clocks in Blackridge stopped. All of them. Wall-mounted, wrist watches, even digital timers on the terminals, frozen at 3:33 a.m., no matter what. Time had fractured, or maybe the prison was done with it entirely. Jensen sat alone in the control room, staring at the feeds. Myra. Jonah. Evelyn. Still breathing. Still waiting. But someone else had appeared. Cell 17C was supposed to be empty. But the camera showed a figure inside. Slumped. Barefoot. Wrapped in tattered robes that looked like prison blankets soaked in tar. The figure's hands were too long, dragging on the floor. Its head hung low. It hadn't been there last night. Jensen leaned in. When the figure raised its face, he recoiled. It was Officer Marcus Heller. But it couldn't be. Heller had vanished. Consumed. Bound to the warden's innards like an organ. Yet here he was, half-formed, eyes stitched shut, mouth filled with dirt, tally marks carved in layers across his face and skull like sediment in bone. The intercom crackled. A voice, flat, staticky, but familiar, whispered. He is not a man now. He is the prison's memory, regrown. The warden can't forget what made it. Jensen left the control room and headed for cell block C with the mask clutched under his arm. He still hadn't learned to sleep in it. It whispered too many names. As he approached the cell, the temperature dropped, and with it came the sound, not footsteps, but reversed breathing, like someone gasping inward over and over. The figure of Heller sat in the center of the cell now, staring up with eyeless sockets filled with iron shavings. Marcus. Jensen asked, his voice shaking. Not anymore, it rasped. I am the echo of guilt. The structure's guilt. The warden's shadow. Jensen gripped the bars. Why are you back? To remind you that you were never meant to inherit the mask. You stole it. I was chosen. You were convenient. It smiled. Behind it, the wall began to bulge, a blister of mortar and rebar forming in the shape of a door. A new key is forming, the Hella thing whispered. One not shaped by death. The wall split. But by regret. Elsewhere in Blackridge, Myra was missing from her cell. Guards, those that still resembled humans, searched the north wing. They found only a trail of dead songbirds, each one gutted and sewn shut with human hair. At the end of the hallway was a word, burned into the floor. Sing. And behind the walls? Children's laughter. Jonah had clawed something out of his chest. Not a heart. A key made of teeth. 32 of them, arranged in the shape of a jawbone. He rocked back and forth, eyes white, murmuring to the air. She's coming back. The one I failed to dismember. She never left the walls. The temperature in his cell hit -11 degrees Celsius. The steel bars began to rust upward. Evelyn never moved from room 0. But her book had fully unlocked. All 7 clasps undone. Its pages flipped on their own, and wherever they landed, the walls changed. Entire corridors that never existed before appeared. Rooms restructured. Cell blocks vanished, swallowed by the ink. Jensen watched it all on the cameras, breath caught in his throat. And then, the final page turned. Blank. Until a line appeared. What was made to contain can also be summoned. Memory is a two-way mirror. And in the glass before Evelyn, another warden stood. It wasn't Jensen. It wasn't Hella. It was something older. Back in the chapel, the altar cracked. Again. Not from pressure, from within. The stone parted like bone being rebroken, and out poured photographs, charred and rotting, past inmates, past guards, past sins. Each photo now bore a tally mark. And at the center of the pile, a new key. The regret key. It pulsed with a soft heartbeat, but not Jensen's. Hella's. The piece of him that remained, still lived. And it had found a way back. Jensen stood in the chapel an hour later, holding the key. He felt it in his spine, guilt, sorrow, a past he hadn't even lived but still bore. He turned to the empty pews. The chapel filled. Slowly. Figures emerged. Past prisoners. Old staff. Even himself, in uniform, younger, innocent. All of them Saturday. All of them watched. And one by one, they began to hum. Not music. A warning. A countdown. The monitors in the control room flashed red. Inmates, 3 active, 41 returned. Keys, 6 or 7. Incursion event in 39 hours. Mask stability, 59%. In the mirror of room 0, Evelyn stood face to face with the old warden, her smile sharper now. Let's open a second gate, she whispered. And the mirror cracked. Chapter 13, The Second Gate. 38 hours remained. That's what the monitors said. But the clocks had stopped again. Some spun in reverse. Some ticked in Morse. Others just bled down the walls in globs of rust and mercury. Time wasn't linear anymore. It was haunted. Jensen stood before the chapel altar with the 6th key in hand, the regret key, carved from Hella's unfinished penance. The pews behind him groaned under the weight of phantoms. Former guards, prisoners, lost souls all staring with eyeless sockets and cracked badges. He knew now what the 7th key had to be. Not an object. A place. The map of Blackridge had changed. New corridors. Impossible floors. Sublevels that didn't exist last week now stretched miles downward. Elevators without shafts. Stairs that ended in waking dreams. The prison was unfolding. Preparing. Evelyn stood in room 0, mirror shattered, pages of her book flying around her like birds made of ink. She had removed her own eyes, willingly, and filled the sockets with black candles, their flames whispering. The old warden in the mirror whispered something only she could hear. And she replied. Then it must be built again, on the bones of the living. A second gate had begun to form behind her, not in the chapel, but in memory. Jonah, deep in cell block F, was no longer just one man. The voices inside him had split. Now he was 12 people, talking over one another, their tongues morphing into lengths of barbed wire. Each one argued for a different kind of death. One voice rose above the rest. Bring us to the new warden. We were loyal to the old one. We remember the taste of real order. And the cell door dissolved into salt. Myra hadn't been seen in 20 hours. But her voice remained. It echoed through vents and drains, in children's giggles and screams. The north wing was sealed off completely, overtaken by a nursery that had never existed. Anyone who entered came out aged for years, or didn't come out at all. One guard returned with a balloon tied to his wrist and no hands. Written on the balloon, "Please don't let Mommy out." Back in the control room, Jensen tried to maintain order. He tried to breathe. But the mask pulsed. Warm now. Almost affectionate. It whispered, "You're not holding the prison together. You're holding the gate closed. And something is knocking." He turned toward the screens. The countdown now read. Incursion, 25 hours. Gate stability, 41%. Second gate status, activating. A new file appeared in the system. No title. Just a blinking dot. He clicked it. A video played, old, Gry. From a shape in the ceiling, a womb of screams, a nest made from old rules, secrets, and unfinished punishments. It fell to the altar. Soft. Wet. A living key. It cried once. Then stilled. Jensen approached. He did not want to touch it. But his hands moved without his will. The key writhed in his grip, a slug of teeth, eyes, and copper wire, and the 7th mark carved itself into his chest, just above his heart. He collapsed. And when he woke, he was in the original Blackridge. But he was watching himself walk the halls. Time folded. He saw the other wardens, 7 of them, in sequence, each becoming less human than the last. Each one unlocking the gates again and again. And behind them all, a mirror, in which nothing was ever truly locked away. Jensen rose. The 7th key pulsed in his hands. The gates began to part. One here. One in the mirror world. And Evelyn, in room 0, smiled as her body split into 2, one in each world, now able to speak both realities. She whispered, "He's here. The true warden. And he's hungry." Chapter 14, The Gates That Breathe. The countdown reached 0. Gate status, open. Incursion event, active. And somewhere far beyond Blackridge, in a place with no name but too many memories, the first tremors were felt. A gas station 82 miles away cracked down the center of the parking lot. No quake was recorded. No fault line existed. But out from the rupture crawled insects with human teeth, clicking and whispering names no one should remember. A customer inside blinked, and suddenly, she was inside a cell, hands bound, her tongue nailed to the wall. Her body never left the store. But her soul was arraigned. At a state penitentiary in Ohio, every prisoner woke screaming the same word. Blackridge. One ripped out his own vocal cords. Another wrote the symbol, triangle with the vertical line, in blood on the warden's office door. That night, the prison disappeared. Just gone. a crater where it had been. Walls folded into themselves like lungs in reverse. The crater pulsed and bled. Back inside Blackridge, Jensen stood in the chapel, where the seventh key, now fully awake, crawled up his arm, embedding itself beneath the skin like a parasite seeking its home. Each tally mark on his body ignited. Not fire. Memory. He remembered things he never lived. Was that never happened? Executions carried out in different centuries. Wounds from blades that didn't exist in this world. The wardenhood was no longer his. It was everyone's. The gates were no longer symbolic. They were physical. Two massive doors, one at each end of the prison's axis, had emerged from the ground. Black stone arches twisted with teeth and typewritten confessions. The hinges were made of spines, still twitching. One gate led inward. The other led backward. Both were open. And from them came the old prisoners. Not just the dead. Not just the remembered. But the forgotten. People no one mourned. People scrubbed from history. People who shouldn't exist. They returned. They walked the halls of Blackridge. Some with their crimes tattooed across their skin. Others with no faces at all. Each one carried a number. Each number bled. Evelyn, now fully split, one in the world of mirrors, one in the real, stood before the gate of return. She opened the book again. Its pages now described the future. It read, "The next world will be one long corridor. There will be no sky. The warden will be the only law." She smiled. Let it begin. Jonah finally broke. The voices in him stopped mid-sentence and fell silent. He looked up. He wept blood. And then, finally, he spoke in his own voice. "He's here." And with a soft crack, his body bent backwards, vertebrae snapping, until his face stared straight into the ceiling. And the ceiling blinked. In the control room, Jensen placed the mask on his face. It no longer protested. It accepted him now. Because he wasn't resisting anymore. He spoke into the intercom, and the entire prison heard it. The chapel. The cells. The dead. The world. This is Warden Jensen. Welcome back to Blackridge. Your sentence is forever. And in the valley outside, the land trembled. A second prison began to rise from the ground, not built, but remembered. As if the world had once known it, then chosen to forget. A twin to Blackridge. But hungrier. With no exits. And inside it, the hollow warden's true body stirred. Chapter 15, The Book of Erasure. It began with a name. One name, whispered, then forgotten. Spoken by a mother in her sleep. Erased from a tombstone. Then a year disappeared. Then a town. Blackridge had begun erasing the world. Not with fire. With forgetting. The twin prison now towered over the valley. It had no name, only a mouth where the warden's office should be. The gate read nothing, just 7 red tally marks that bled endlessly into the earth. The hollow warden had moved into its true form. A construct of law without mercy, justice without memory. And it was still hungry. Jensen stood on the upper walk of the original chapel, now fractured across realities. With the mask fused to his skull, he was no longer Warden Jensen. He was simply Warden. There would be no more passing of the mantle. No more failed successors. This time, the warden would be eternal. He watched as Evelyn placed the Book of Erasure on the altar. The pages turned on their own. Each one listed a person, a place, or an event. When Evelyn read the names aloud, the world above shifted. The sun dimmed. History books blinked blank. Photographs bled black ink. She whispered, 2003, Camp Lil Lace fire. The children no longer died. They never existed. She turned the page. 1911, the Blackridge riots. No guards were killed, because the prison had never been built. She kept reading, and with each word, a whole formed in memory. Myra, now unshackled, walked the halls humming. Children's drawings followed her, painted in light on the walls, but with no hands to draw them. They blinked in and out of time. She had become a carrier of forgetting. Everything she passed would lose one fact about itself. A door that no longer knew how to open. A hallway that didn't remember where it led. A prisoner who forgot his own name and collapsed in grief. Jonah's body had become a shrine. Stone hands protruded from his chest, holding relics of prisons that had never existed, a blooded badge from Warden Fallamore, a key labelled Cell 0000, a calendar showing 13 months. People began to pray at his corpse, and were never seen again. Back in the chapel, Jensen turned to Evelyn. She no longer bled. She no longer spoke aloud. She thought the names now. And the book obeyed. Do you know what happens when we forget everything? Jensen asked. We are remade, Evelyn said calmly. No. We become the gate itself. Evelyn nodded. Then let's finish opening it. That night, all mirrors shattered across every continent. Every reflective surface cracked. Inside each, just for a second, the hollow warden was visible. Watching. Waiting. Judging. Blackridge Twin Prison opened its gates to non-prisoners now. Citizens. Judges. Clergy. One by one, people vanished from society and woke up in cells, already sentenced for crimes not yet committed. Their memories rewritten. You were always here, the guards whispered. You were always guilty. You just forgot. The final pages of the Book of Erasure flipped open. And there, Evelyn saw a list. But this time, not of people. Of concepts. Sleep. Rest. Mercy. Hope. She ran a finger down the list. Stopped. And read. The name of God. Jensen turned. Don't, he said. Why not? Evelyn asked. Because if you erase that, even the warden won't remember why it punishes. Evelyn smiled. Exactly. And then she began to read. The air howled. The prison shook. Chains rose from the floor, from the ceilings, from inside the walls. They dragged the chapel downward, into memory. Into history. Into oblivion. And as Blackridge disappeared from every record, every book, every mind, one voice remained. The mask. Whispering. Not a name. Not a command. Not even a scream. Just a truth. You cannot forget what never ended. Chapter 16, The Law That Judges Memory. The world ended quietly. No fire. No collapse. Just forgetting. Maps grew blank spots. Languages dropped certain words. Entire belief systems unraveled like moth-eaten cloth. People stared at their children and couldn't remember naming them. And yet, no one panicked. Because panic requires memory of what was, of what should be. And the Book of Erasure was nearly full. Inside Blackridge, now folded across dimensions, Jensen moved through the prison like a god sleepwalking through his own dream. But he wasn't dreaming. He was administering. The warden does not sleep. The warden does not judge. The warden simply remembers. The law had changed. No longer built from systems or decrees. The new law, Warden's Law, was burned into the bones of the place. Carved into floor tiles. Etched on prisoners' teeth. Whispered to newborns in hospitals far from the valley. And it went like this. All things must be witnessed. All memory is a weapon. What you forget, you become. Punishment precedes guilt. The warden is the wall. Jensen no longer needed to walk. He appeared. In cells. In mirrors. in thoughts. He did not speak with lips anymore, but with gravity, drawing those near him into submission. The mask had become his skull. The keys had melted into his spine. He was the warden, not in title, but in nature. Evelyn remained at the center, the chapel, the gate, the book of erasure in her lap. Her body was gone. She was made of pages now, fluttering in a wind that came from no source. She did not speak. She read. And as she read, reality reshaped itself. She read out loud. Pain was a construct. It no longer applies. A man in a distant hospital coded and smiled because he could no longer suffer. The moon was a punishment. We no longer require it. The tide stopped. Oceans grew still. Wolves howled in confusion. The concept of time was invented by the guilty. It is revoked. All clocks exploded at once. Watches liquefied. People began aging out of sequence. Back in the original chapel, Jonah's shrine body burst into flame. But the fire burned cold, devouring not heat, but narrative. The event of his crimes unraveled. His victims returned to life. But only for a moment. Then they faded, never having existed. And Jonah's soul finally stopped screaming. Myra became a voice in the vents. Not dead. Not gone. Just remembered incorrectly. When guards spoke her name, they bled from the ears. When inmates thought of her, their children disappeared from photo albums. And still, Blackridge expanded. The twin prison on the surface cracked open. Inside it, the true hollow warden crawled forward. Not as a person. As a legal principle made flesh. A being composed of oaths, forgotten crimes, buried evidence, and the names of the innocent whispered in the dark. It had no eyes. It was the eyes. It had no feet. It moved on guilt. And with each step, the land beneath it rewrote. Fields became gallows. Schools became confession booths. Churches became holding cells. And on the seventh day, the warden spoke a new command. All who remember the world must now confess. People began dreaming of courtrooms made of bone. Testifying against themselves. Sentencing their reflections. Begging for crimes they couldn't name to finally be punished. The warden watched. And marked them. One tally per soul. Evelyn whispered. Soon, nothing will remain that wasn't sentenced. Jensen stood above the chapel, mask gleaming, arms wide. And when we are done, even memory will be imprisoned. Chapter 17, The Ones Who Remember. Before Blackridge consumed the sky, before the sun dimmed and the tide forgot to rise, there were 4 names etched in the forgotten archives beneath the Bureau's occult division. Names that refused to be erased. People who remembered, even when the world tried to forget. They were called the Witnesses. They did not live in one place. They did not answer to time. They wore no uniforms, no armor. But they carried memory like a shield. The first was Adeline Cross, who kept a map tattooed on her bones, a layout of Blackridge from 1867 to its first collapse. She was blind, but saw every corridor in her dreams. The second was Father Enoch, a defrocked priest who swallowed the true name of God during an exorcism and has not aged since. The third, Milo Greer, had died once inside Blackridge, but clawed his way back out through a crack in the wall, leaving half his shadow behind. And the fourth, the most dangerous, was a girl named Dara. She was born after the prison had been forgotten. And yet, she knew every name written in the Book of Erasure, including her own. They came together in a motel off the map. The sky above them was bruised, blinking like a tired eye. TVs played nothing but static shaped like barbed wire. The wind blew backward. They did not care. They had a plan. They called it the anchor. A counterweight. A memory so heavy, so absolute, that even Blackridge couldn't digest it. A seed of truth, buried deep beneath the valley floor, long before the prison was built, long before Jensen became warden, long before the first key was shaped. Its name had been lost. But Dara remembered it. The Hollow Warden is built on forgetting, she said. So we plant something it can't forget. Something it never knew. Adeline prepared the ritual. Milo marked the walls with his shadow. Father Enoch burned his own name. And Dara walked into the ruins of Blackridge, alone. With a memory so old it had never been born. Inside the prison, Jensen felt it immediately. The tremor. Not from the world cracking, but from something being remembered against its will. The mask pulsed with warning. A memory has entered. It is not ours. It is not lawful. Purge. Dara walked through the south gate with no resistance. The prison tried to stop her, doors twisted, gravity screamed, rats clawed at their own spines, but none of it touched her. Because she didn't belong to this world. She was a foreign thought. A contradiction. A wound that wouldn't forget to bleed. She walked past Evelyn's altar. Past Jonah's cold fire. Past the chapel itself. She walked beneath Blackridge. To the place no one knew. The foundation cell. Where the original floor plan had called for an orchard. Not a prison. The Hollow Warden screamed. It wasn't a noise. It was the feeling of every unjust sentence ever passed, collapsing in on itself. Jensen appeared before Dara. Mask blazing, hands filled with smoke. You don't belong here, he said. Dara smiled. Exactly. And she opened her memory. The ground split. Not into fire, into light. The orchard returned. An orchard that never was. Where no crimes had been committed. Where no walls had been built. Where children played under the sun. Where no one wore chains. Jensen staggered. The mask cracked. Because for the first time, the warden doubted. The gates flickered. The book of erasure paused. And the twin prison, the one built of memory, bone, and regret, began to shrink. Slowly. Like it was ashamed. Evelyn felt the pull. She turned her blank eyes toward Dara. And whispered. You carry the truth. That's cheating. But the rules had already changed. Because somewhere inside that orchard, a name was written on a tree. A name not in the book. A name no one had given her. And yet it burned in the bark. The warden must remember why. Chapter 18, The Name in the Orchard. Jensen stood at the edge of the orchard, mask fractured, the ground beneath him split between prison stone and grass that had never grown. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from something far older. Recognition. Dara walked through the orchard without touching the ground. Where her feet should have crushed the grass, memories rose instead, unclaimed, unsorted. A boy learning to whistle. A woman choosing not to report a crime. A moment of forgiveness no one remembered having. All of it rising like steam. And none of it fit into Blackridge's system. Because none of it could be punished. You're breaking it, Jensen said, voice distant beneath the mask. No, Dara whispered. I'm reminding it. She reached out and touched the bark of the tree that bore the phrase. The warden must remember why. And from the tree, a door split open. Inside, a memory Jensen didn't know he had. He staggered. The world around him flickered. The prison pulsed red. The lights in the chapel went out all at once. And he was alone. No Evelyn. No book. No altar. Just the orchard. And the door. He stepped through. And found himself in a house. Ordinary. Sunlight filtered in through half-closed blinds. Dust swirled in the light. And there was a table. At the table, a child, drawing quietly. And next to him, Jensen. But not as he was now. No mask. No keys. Just him. Before the prison. Before Blackridge. Back when he was still an officer. Still a man. Still trying. The child turned and smiled. I'm sorry I broke the window. Jensen felt something crack inside him. I told you I'd fix it. He remembered. The boy's name was Caleb. He'd been 6. Jensen had adopted him when the boy's mother OD'd. They had lived in this house. Played card games. Burned pancakes. Built a treehouse that never survived a storm. Then one night, Caleb didn't come home. Gone. No leads. No ransom. Just gone. Swallowed by the world. Swallowed by something hungry. And that was the day Jensen volunteered for the Blackridge Transfer Initiative. He buried the house. Buried the memory. And became the one thing that could not be abandoned. The warden. You forgot him, Dara whispered, stepping beside him. You had to. Jensen's mouth opened, but no sound came. He turned to the boy. I never punished you. The boy smiled. Because I wasn't guilty. The walls of the house trembled. The mask fell from Jensen's face and shattered on the floor. Back in Blackridge, alarms screamed without sound. The Book of Erasure caught fire. Evelyn shrieked, her first sound in ages. Because the book was forgetting itself. Page after page curled to ash. Whole laws unbound. Whole punishments unwritten. The book screamed a name. Caleb. 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 And with that, the 7th tally on Jensen's chest vanished. The prison convulsed. And for the first time, released a prisoner. The sky above it cracked open, not into light, not into fire. Into choice. Jensen stood in the orchard, holding the boy's hand. He looked at Dara. What happens now? That depends, she said. Do you remember why the warden existed? He closed his eyes. To protect the world from guilt that can't be undone. Dara nodded. Then make something better. Something that doesn't feed on memory. Behind them, Blackridge howled one last time. Stone shrieked. Iron wept. Chains withered. And the prison, along with the twin that mirrored it, began to fold inward. Not destroyed. Contained. Within a single seed. Dara placed it in Jensen's hand. Don't plant it again unless the world forgets itself. Somewhere far away, people started to remember their names. Photos developed correctly again. Time resumed its flow. The moon returned. And prisons across the world grew quiet. But beneath it all, a voice whispered, "We still remember you." Warden. Chapter 19, The Letters That Shouldn't Exist. The world moved on. Blackridge was gone. Folded into silence, wrapped in memory, tucked into a place even the gods didn't dare name. The sky returned. The clocks ticked forward. History limped back into order. But Jensen did not sleep. He now lived in a small house outside a town that no longer remembered it once bordered the prison. No one asked about the mask. No one noticed the scar where the 7th tally used to be. But in his dreams, he still walked the orchard. And in his mailbox, the letters began to arrive. The first was postmarked 1954. Torn at the edges. Yellow with time. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Meticulous. Dear Warden, I know you said I wouldn't remember what I did. But I do. I remember the sound of the water. I remember the girl's name. I remember how long it took her to stop moving. You said I was forgiven. But how can I be if I still remember? Sincerely. Inmate #314***. Jensen read it 3 times. The ink smelled like iron. He never met an inmate 314. But his hand shook like he had. The second letter arrived a week later, postmarked from 2027. That year hadn't happened yet. Inside. Dear Warden, I never stepped foot in Blackridge. But every night, I wake up in a cell. The same number. Cell 9. I hear them carving the keys again. I think you left the door open. Yours in silence. E. No signature. No surname. But he knew. Evelyn. He burned the letter. The flames turned blue. The ashes whispered as they rose. We're still sentenced. That night, the orchard bloomed for the first time. But only one tree. The one that held his son's name. And beneath it, another letter. No postmark. Just a folded note, handwritten in small, shaky pencil lines. You gave me 7 keys to forget. But I only needed 1 to forgive. Thank you. See. Jensen cried for the first time in decades. The next day, he began receiving letters every morning. Some in languages that no longer existed. Some in blood. Some in paper made from human skin, etched with ink that shimmered when read aloud. All addressed to the final warden. And none of them asked for release. They asked for memory. Who was I? Did I deserve it? Can you still see me? Do I still exist? Am I still guilty? Am I still was me? He catalogued them all. He never answered. He couldn't. Because to answer would be to reopen the gate. And that gate was now inside him. He buried the letters under the orchard tree. 7 feet down. 7 days later, they were back in the mailbox. Unopened. At the end of the week, 1 more letter arrived. Not typed. Not written. Carved into stone. A slab with his name etched across the top. To Warden Jensen. We're building again. Not because of cruelty. Because people are starting to forget. And when memory fails, we need you again. Witness Group Omega. He held the stone in his lap that night. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply whispered, "No." But the orchard had already begun to change. The tree had grown a single fruit. Black. Veined. Heavy. Inside it pulsed a soft light. Like a heartbeat. Chapter 20, The Prison of Forgiveness. The black fruit hung from the lowest branch. It pulsed with memory. Not just Jensen's. Not just Blackridge's. Everyone's. The weight of every apology never made. Every sin quietly buried. Every wrong that was never punished, and every punishment that was never deserved. The fruit dropped. And when it hit the ground, it didn't split. It rang like a bell. Jensen knelt and picked it up. It felt like holding a child's heartbeat. Alive. Hopeful. Terrifying. That night, he had no dreams. Only a name. Sanctum 9. 3 days later, a woman appeared on his doorstep. Black suit. Pale eyes. Red clipboard. She didn't introduce herself. Didn't have to. Jensen had seen her before. In a vision during his earliest days inside Blackridge, standing beside a blood fountain and smiling at a line of weeping prisoners. "It's time," she said. "The world is rebuilding." They made another one. Jensen didn't move. Sanctum 9, she added. A spiritual facility. No steel. No chains. No guards. Just grace. Then it's not a prison, Jensen said. That's what they thought, she replied. Until the wall started remembering people that hadn't arrived yet. She handed him a folder. 7 pages. No ink. Only impressions, like memories pressed into soft flesh. Jensen ran his fingers across them. Names formed. Myra. Jonah. Evelyn. Hella. And one that hadn't been written yet. Jensen. Room 3. The next morning, he buried the black fruit beside the letters again. He packed nothing. He walked. Sanctum 9 stood in the middle of nowhere. Not a fence. Not a guard tower. Just white walls and tall glass windows shaped like halos. Scripture engraved in every surface. In every language, even ones not spoken yet. The entrance whispered, "Come clean. Leave whole." But when he stepped inside, the floor breathed. The first thing he saw was a mirror. It didn't reflect him. It reflected everyone he'd sentenced. All of them. All at once. Their eyes followed him. They were waiting. A voice echoed through the air, familiar, yet wrong. "Welcome, Warden. You are a visitor and a resident. This is a prison made of mercy. And mercy must remember." He walked the white halls. Everything was too clean. No keys. No locks. No cells. But he felt the weight of the mask on his face, though it had long since vanished. Room 3 waited for him. He opened the door. And inside, Caleb. His son looked exactly as he did the last time Jensen had seen him, 6 years old, barefoot, a piece of string wrapped around 2 fingers, humming to himself. "You're not real," Jensen said, voice cracked. "I am if you want me to be," Caleb replied. "They made this room for you. So you can learn to forgive yourself." Jensen sat down on the floor. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, "I wasn't there when you needed me. I tried to control the world because I couldn't save you. So I punished everyone else." Caleb nodded slowly, then smiled. "That's okay, Dad. I remember." And Jensen began to cry. The walls trembled. Elsewhere in Sanctum 9, new rooms opened. Rooms not on any blueprint. Rooms filled with pages. The Book of Erasure was reforming. But this time, it was blank. Waiting for new stories. Waiting for choices. Back in room 3, Jensen held his son in his arms for the first time in years. And when he opened his eyes again, he was gone. But the warmth remained. A reminder. Not a punishment. Outside, the woman in black stood beneath a tree that hadn't existed yesterday. She watched Jensen emerge. "You made it," she said. "Was I forgiven?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "You were remembered." And above them, high above the clouds, something darker stirred. Because forgiveness, too, is a kind of sentence. And the one still forgotten? Want back in. Chapter 21, The Inmate Who Was Never Born. Sanctum 9 breathed peace. That was the promise. No guards. No keys. No chains. Only memory, rooms, and quiet reconciliation. But that morning, the alarm sounded for the first time. Not a siren, a voice. Mechanical. Soft. Fractured. A presence has arrived. It has no origin. It has no crime. It has requested judgment. Jensen was the first to respond. He no longer wore a uniform. No title. No badge. Just the knowledge. He entered the intake chamber expecting something malformed or monstrous. But the figure waiting behind the observation glass was ordinary. Female. Young. As the color of fog. No scars. No tattoos. No signs of violence. Just a smile. And a tag around her neck. Inmate 0000. Name none. Crime undeclared. Reason for incarceration self-requested. She tilted her head when Jensen entered. I heard this was where the guilty came to remember, she said. I think I'm guilty of not existing. He stared. You weren't born. Not really, she said. I've been almost born many times. Miscarriages. Erased timelines. Forgotten names on paper. Every time someone said, we were going to name her, that was me. She pressed a hand to the glass. I remember all the times I wasn't. The air grew cold. Jensen felt a pressure behind his eyes, like someone trying to pull memory through his skull. There's no record of you, he whispered. That's why I came here, she said. Because the other prisons turned me away. The other wardens couldn't hold me. But you. She leaned in. You remember things that were never real. Outside the intake room, the facility began to flicker. Lights dimmed. Doors unhinged. Room 3, Caleb's room, disappeared. No dust. No trace. Like it had never been built. The woman in black appeared beside Jensen. She's an orphan of possibility, she said. The ghost of almost. Can we hold her? Jensen asked. No, the woman replied. But she can hold us. They placed inmate 0000 in room 0, the containment chamber never used, never even drawn on the schematics. It built itself for her. White walls. No corners. No time. And in the center, a mirror. But not one that reflected. One that dreamed. Inside the room, she sat cross-legged, staring into the glass. It began showing not images, but lives she might have had. A mother's kiss. A birthday party with no candles. A name written in crayon, Clara. She wept. But she did not scream. Jensen sat outside the room for hours. When she finally looked up, she said, "Do I deserve to be punished for what I could have been?" He answered honestly, "No." "Then why does it hurt like I did something wrong?" He said nothing. She smiled. "That's why you're still the warden." That night, 7 new letters arrived at the front desk of Sanctum 9. Each addressed to inmate 0000. Each written in different languages. All from people who said, "I think I remember you." She read them one by one. Then laid down. And whispered, "Thank you for remembering me wrong." And then, like a dream UN dreamed, she vanished. No noise. No trace. But the mirror remained. It now reflected her face. And underneath it, one sentence. Sometimes the forgotten just want to be held, not judged. Jensen stood before it, hand pressed to the glass. Not as a warden. Not as a savior. But as someone who finally understood. Some prisons don't hold criminals. Some hold grief. Chapter 22, What the Hollow Warden Buried. Sanctum 9 stood quiet. After inmate 0000 vanished, the halls grew colder. Not from fear, but awareness. Something had shifted. Something had been seen that shouldn't have been. The Book of Erasure had no new pages. The mirror in room 0 still reflected a girl who never lived. And deep beneath the floor, the seal pulsed. Few knew it existed. Jensen didn't. Not even Evelyn, who once rewrote laws in blood. But the woman in black did. She'd known since the first day Blackridge cracked open and sang its terrible hymn. And now she stood at the foot of the chamber that has no name. 7 locks. No key. Only blood. She pulled her gloves off. Showed hands scarred with ancient glyphs, not carved, but born into her. She pressed her palms against the final wall. The symbols began to bleed. The door dissolved. And inside lay the memory the Hollow Warden feared most. Not a monster. Not a warden. Not a prisoner. A child. Small. Lying still. wrapped in cloth printed with names, not in ink, but in absence. Each letter written in reverse, like they'd been carved from a mirror and stitched in silence. Above the child, a sign. Do not remember. If you remember, it begins again. The woman in black whispered. He's stirring. And far above, in Sanctum 9's chapel, Jensen dropped his mug. He felt the echo in his spine. Something just woke up, he said. Adeline Cross felt it too, though blind, her bones burned with the shape of Blackridge's old corridors. She dropped her cane and said, "It's not over." Father Enoch, in self-imposed exile, screamed the name of a God that does not forgive. His teeth split. And in a hospital basement where no room should be, Dara stopped mid-sentence. They kept a seed. A real one. Back beneath Sanctum 9, the child opened its eyes. Empty. Not white. Not black. Just unfinished. Like memory waiting to be written. And it smiled. In room 0, the mirror shattered. All at once. No sound. Just a pulse of sorrow that rippled through the facility like a tidal wave. The lights flickered. And every monitor read. The seal has been broken. The first memory returns. Prepare to be rewritten. Jensen sprinted through the lower levels. He followed the heat. The light. The grief. The pulse that had lived under his feet since before Sanctum 9 had walls. He reached the chamber just as the child began to cry. The woman in black turned to him. This is what the Hollow Warden buried inside itself. Not punishment. Not guilt. Innocence. Jensen fell to his knees. Why would it hide that? Because innocence is the only thing that could undo it. And now. She looked down. It's learning to remember itself. The child stood. But didn't grow. Didn't speak. It simply pointed at Jensen. And said, "You're the one who taught them how to forget." The ground cracked. Sanctum 9's chapel tilted 5 degrees north. Doors locked themselves. Mirrors fogged. The Book of Erasure flipped to its final page, still blank. Waiting. Jensen whispered. "What do I do?" The woman in black placed a hand on his shoulder. "You either teach it the world again, or it becomes the next warden." And behind them, the Hollow Warden's final secret began to walk. A child made of unformed memory, destined to carry every guilt that was never earned. Chapter 23, Raising the First Memory. The child walked barefoot through the lower levels of Sanctum 9. The walls didn't recognize him. Sensors failed. Locks rusted open. The lights didn't flicker, they bowed. The woman in black followed from a distance. Jensen walked closer. He didn't dare touch the boy. Because whatever he wasn't a boy. Not exactly. He was what guilt forgot. They named him Noel. Not for a reason. Just a sound the child made once when he touched the air and tasted grief. Noel never slept. He didn't cry. He didn't laugh. He wandered the halls drawing with his finger. Not on the walls, but into them. Sketching shapes only visible when no one looked. One guard stared too long and forgot the name of their own mother. Another trailed him for hours and vanished into a corridor that wasn't there. Jensen tried to speak to him. "Do you know where you come from?" Noel looked up. "I am not from. I am before." "Before what?" "Before punishment learned to breathe." Days passed. Then weeks. And still, Noel never aged. But something beneath the surface did. The floor plans of Sanctum 9 began to rewrite. Corridors looped in spirals. Room 0 grew eyes. The orchard outside bore fruit that whispered. And the Book of Erasure grew nervous. One night, Noel stood at the heart of the chapel. Empty. Barefoot. Eyes hollow but wide. He said only one thing. Build me a gate. Jensen, exhausted and shaking, sat with the woman in black. If I do this? I start it all again. Not necessarily, she said. You once built gates to keep people out. Maybe this one brings people in. Into what? She touched his hand. Memory. Unpunished. The next day, the workers arrived. Volunteers. None remembered signing up. None knew why they'd come. They built with stone that hadn't existed the week before, quarried from dreams. And the gate they constructed wasn't tall, wasn't threatening. It was shaped like a question mark. Curved and graceful. And when it was done, Noel stood beneath it and said, "This one won't lock. Only remember, the gate of witnessing was born. Not to hold. Not to judge. But to invite. And when the first visitors came, strangers, lost, weeping, they didn't receive sentences. They received a seat. A question. A memory played back from their own life. Where did you stop being innocent? Not to accuse. To help them remember. But gates are still doors. And doors let in everything." That night, Noel dreamed for the first time. The chapel grew cold. The stars disappeared. And beneath the earth, a new voice stirred. Older than the hollow warden. Older than guilt. A voice without judgment. A voice that envied memory. Jensen sat at Noel's bedside. Watched the boy twitch in sleep, drawing shapes against the blanket with his fingers. Circles. Eyes. The triangle. 7 lines. The original symbol. Jensen whispered, "What are you?" Noel smiled faintly, half asleep. "I'm what you'd become if you were never punished." Far below, in the deepest room of Sanctum 9, a chamber no one built. The mirror Evelyn once vanished into reformed. But this time, it reflected the viewer's worst crime. And in its surface, a shape leaned forward. Not Noel. Not Jensen. Not Evelyn. Something with no face and a keyhole for a throat. And it whispered, "You can forgive the guilty. But what do you do with the innocent?" Chapter 24, When Innocence Unlocks. Noel began speaking names. Not loudly. Not maliciously. He would whisper them during walks through Sanctum 9. Names of residents. Visitors. People who had never set foot in the facility, yet still flinched when the name was spoken. Grace Holler. Amir Bennell. Dr. Ephraim Oswald. Caleb Jensen. The names carried weight. Each syllable rippled outward. Each name became a doorway. Visitors collapsed. Not from pain. From memory. They would wake afterward with knowledge they'd spent a lifetime avoiding. One man remembered the twin he absorbed in the womb. A woman remembered not saving someone when she could have. A child remembered dying once before and not telling their parents. They didn't scream. They didn't run. They Saturday. And they wept. Because Noel wasn't showing them punishment. He was showing them truth. But the facility itself began to resist. Hallways blinked in and out of existence. Doors refused to stay shut. Mirrors whispered, "He is unlocking everything." The woman in black came to Jensen with a warning. "He's not malicious. He's just doing what he was made for. He remembers what memory lost. And memory includes what shouldn't have been kept." They found the first evidence of something wrong in room 3. Caleb's room. It had returned. But it was wrong. The bed was too long. The windows showed a prison, not the orchard. The drawings on the wall were still, but they changed every time someone looked away. And beneath the bed was a word scratched in the floor. Lethe. Jensen froze. Lethe wasn't a name. It was a place. One that had been locked before Blackridge. Before memory had formed. before guilt had words. Lethe was the river of forgetting. A concept made physical and sealed inside a warden's skull. And now, Noel had found its name. Jensen confronted him that evening in the chapel. Noel was kneeling before the altar, arranging bones into shapes no one could name, yet everyone feared. "You can't keep doing this," Jensen said. "People aren't ready to remember the things we buried." Noel looked up. "But they're still inside them. I don't give the guilt. I just open the lock." Jensen hesitated. "What's Lethe to you?" Noel tilted his head. Smiled. "A gate. But not like the others. This one drinks memory. And if I open it, there's nothing left. No guilt. No innocence. No warden." At that moment, every monitor in Sanctum 9 blinked to life. No video feed. No map. Just one line. Lethe detected, gate integrity 48%. Warning, unforgiven core exposed. Jensen turned to run, but Noel stopped him. Not by force. Just by speaking. "You buried too much inside too many. Eventually, something had to dig." That night, a visitor arrived at Sanctum 9. An old man. Skin like dust. Eyes like dried paper. He handed Jensen a letter. No name. No address. Inside. "Dear Warden, I remember the day you erased my trial. I didn't deserve forgiveness. But I didn't ask for it either. I think it's time I finish my sentence. Where should I go?" It was signed. Inmate number 1. Below Sanctum 9, Lethe stirred. Not water. Not fire. Not stone. A river of absence, long denied. And now it called for its original architect. "Jensen, you built me with silence. Now come back and drink." Chapter 25, the sentence that started it all. The map of Sanctum 9 no longer functioned. Rooms shifted. Corridors reversed. Walls forgot where they were built. The facility had stopped pretending to be a sanctuary. Now it was a mouthful leading downward. Toward Lethe. Jensen walked alone. Noel had vanished again, leaving behind strange artifacts, a child's boot, a burned photograph, a key shaped like a question mark. And on the floor of the chapel, a note in Jensen's handwriting. He hadn't written it. "When you reach Lethe, do not drink. Do not ask. Do not apologize. Just remember." He took it with him. The deeper he went, the less the halls resembled Sanctum 9. They became narrow. Then fleshy. Then impossible. Stairs turned into slopes made of rusted memory, newspaper clippings that bled, photographs that screamed when touched. He passed 7 doors. Each one sealed. Each one bearing his name. He didn't open them. He knew what was inside. And then the air changed. Heavy. Cold. Unformed. And Lethe waited. It didn't look like a river. It looked like a thought trying to be forgotten. A vast pool of grey liquid. Still. Not reflective. Like molasses made of dreams. It smelled like the last day before a funeral. And when Jensen looked into it, he saw nothing. That was the danger. Not what Lethe held, but what it removed. And someone stood at the shore. Old. Broken. Wrapped in faded cloth and tallies that no longer bled. The man turned. "Took you long enough," he said. Jensen froze. "Hella?" The first warden nodded. "Parts of me. The rest dissolved decades ago. But this part, it stayed behind. Watching. Guarding." He gestured to Lethe. "This is the first punishment. The one no one deserved. And the one no one could stop." Jensen stepped closer. What was it? Oblivion, Hella said. Total. No chance to grow. To heal. To be forgiven. Just erasure. A sentence passed on a soul that never got the chance to live. We tried to bury it. Tried to forget. And in doing so, we created the need for punishment. For rules. For Blackridge. For the mask. For the book. For you. Jensen stared into Lethe. Something in it stirred, not a shape. A lack. It spoke with no voice, yet he heard it. You carry every verdict. But you've never carried your own. Hella looked at him sadly. This is the end of the path, Warden. You can step in and be unmade, or remember what the sentence was and break the cycle. But if you choose to remember, you'll feel everything that's been lost. Jensen knelt by the edge. The water licked at his boots. He closed his eyes. And chose. He remembered. Not just Caleb. Not just Blackridge. Not just the names carved into the cells. He remembered inmate number 1. The man whose crime birthed Lethe. A man who begged not to be forgiven. But was anyway. And the world broke because of it. Jensen screamed. His throat tore. Blood ran from his ears. But he did not step in. He stood. Turned. And said, "We will not build prisons from forgetting anymore. We'll build gardens from memory." Lethe hissed. Collapsed. Sank. Vanished. And above, in Sanctum 9, Noel smiled. Not with innocence. Not with cruelty. But with peace. He turned to the orchard tree and whispered, "You did it. You chose to remember." The gate of witnessing split open. And this time, what stepped through were not inmates, but echoes. Lives once erased. Names once scrubbed from birth certificates. People who had been punished by being forgotten. They stepped into the chapel. They were not judged. They were greeted. The book of erasure closed. And on its final page, Lethe reclaimed. Memory chosen. No more wardens. Just witnesses. Chapter 26, The Gate Without a Crime. Jensen returned to the surface. No longer warden. No longer judge. But he was not empty. Lethe had tried to consume him. Instead, he carried it now like a scar in thought. Not visible. But there. Always. Sanctum 9 was different. The walls no longer murmured. The orchard bore fruit with names burned into them, not in guilt, but in joy. Names once erased, now grown again. Visitors came every day. Not to confess. Not to kneel. But to remember each other. They left with their names intact. Sometimes with new ones. Noel stood at the gate of witnessing each morning. Eyes a little older. Hair now full of whispers. He didn't speak much. But when he smiled, the world felt cleaner. He had become memory's guardian, not its weapon. Jensen had peace for 7 days. Then came the third letter. It arrived by hand. No envelope. Just a sheet of torn cloth. Ink burned into the fabric. There is a gate that never closes. It was not built by the warden. It has no keys. No bars. No guilt. It holds only the people who refuse to be sentenced. We are the uncondemned. And we are coming back. The orchard shuddered. One tree withered. The fruit-bearing Evelyn's name fell and cracked in silence. Noel looked up from the gate and whispered, "They're the ones who slipped through everything. No guilt. No innocence. Just absence. They were never sentenced because they were never seen." Jensen met with the woman in black that evening. She already knew. She always did. What do they want? Jensen asked. Not revenge, she said. Not justice. They want a world where punishment never mattered. Where the warden never existed. Where memory is a lie. That night, mirrors stopped working in Sanctum 9. Not shattered, blank. Visitors began forgetting their own reflections. One woman cried for an hour, not because she lost her face, but because she said she saw someone else in hers. At dawn, the gate of witnessing did something it had never done before. It opened on its own. And something stepped through. Not an inmate. Not a prisoner. Not even a person. A shape. Humanoid, but unfinished. Its limbs blurred. Its face smoothed flat. Its chest bore a word, burned and unreadable, overwritten again and again. And when it spoke, it did so in a perfect replica of Jensen's voice. We don't belong in the book. We don't belong in memory. We belong in the blank spaces. It placed a hand on the gatepost. The stone crumbled. Noel stepped forward, trying to stop it. The figure only smiled. You're the child of correction. We're the children of omission. And our gate was never meant to close. In the earth beneath Sanctum 9, a new crack opened. Deep. Silent. No air. No guilt. No truth. Just the third gate, the gate of exclusion. Where the ones who were never punished simply waited to be noticed. And now? They want a world where no one remembers how to judge. And they'll burn memory to do it. Chapter 27, The War on Truth. The third gate spread like rot. It didn't open with hinges or locks. It appeared. In alleyways. In basements. In dreams. No sound. No warning. Just a thin crack in reality, and the scent of nothing. And through it came the uncondemned. They had no chains. No records. No crimes. Only absence, sharpened into intention. At first, they only watched. Visitors to Sanctum 9 reported seeing themselves from behind. Others saw loved ones who hadn't died, yet mourned them anyway. And some? They stopped dreaming. Not from peace. From extraction. The uncondemned had begun to harvest forgotten memory. One night, Noel didn't come to the gate. Jensen found him in room 0, eyes wide, drawing symbols in ash. They weren't his. They were from the third gate. They twisted. Reversed. Refused to stay drawn. They're writing history backwards, Noel whispered. They want to erase the idea of justice. Not destroy it. Invalidate it. Jensen stepped back. Why now? Because we remembered too much. The next day, the book of erasure bled. Black liquid oozed from its spine. Its pages reversed. Tore themselves. And when they stopped, the name at the top was Caleb Jensen, forgiven in error. Jensen collapsed. Noel caught him, trembling. They're rewriting your past, he said. Trying to make you believe forgiveness was the mistake. Not guilt. And all over the world, subtle changes began. Courthouses refused to open their doors. Confessions turned into laughter mid-sentence. Children forgot what the word punishment meant. In their place came whispers. If there is no guilt, there is no need to change. Sanctum 9 trembled. Fruit rotted overnight. Mirrors broke without shattering, turning black. And the gate of witnessing became clouded, like trying to see through regret. The woman in black summoned Jensen and Noel. Her eyes had changed, darker, slower. They're using our kindness against us, she said. Because we didn't sentence them, they believe nothing matters. And if nothing matters, then truth itself is a prison. She opened her palm. Inside, a shard of the original Hollow Warden's mask. Still warm. You may have to wear it again. Jensen backed away. No. Never again. Noel looked up. Maybe it doesn't go on you. That night, Jensen stood in the orchard alone. He spoke to the tree that bore Caleb's name. You forgave me once. But I don't know if I can forgive the world for forgetting what's real. The leaves stirred. And in the moonlight, Caleb's voice returned. Then remind them. The next morning, Jensen took the shard of the mask to room 0. He held it to the mirror. Not his reflection. Not Noel's. The uncondemned's face looked back. It smiled. We were never guilty, Warden. We just didn't care. And the mirror shattered outward. Chapter 28. The sentence without consent. It began at 2:13 a.m. No alarms. No sirens. Just the sound of every door in Sanctum 9 unlocking at once. Even the doors that didn't exist yesterday. Even the ones that had never been built. The uncondemned stepped in without force. They didn't break walls. They didn't tear flesh. They simply walked, and things forgot how to exist in their presence. Names dissolved off visitor records. Statues melted into bone. One worker watched their reflection peel away like a mask, revealing nothing underneath. The gate of witnessing darkened. Its stone surface warped inward. Where once it showed a future of healing, it now pulsed like an eye remembering trauma it never lived. Jensen and Noel barricaded themselves inside the chapel. Not to survive, but to decide. The woman in black stood at the altar. Between them, the fragment of the hollow warden's mask. Still warm. Still pulsing. If we do this, Jensen said, we become what we buried. Not if we rewrite it, Noel replied. Not if we make it ours. Together, they took the shard. And for the first time since Blackridge fell, Jensen spoke the oath aloud. This is not judgment. This is remembrance. And remembrance must have form. The mask fragment flared white-hot. Then it split into two. One half molded itself to Noel's chest. Not as a mask, but a heart plate. The other half burned itself into Jensen's palm, etching 7 new lines in a language not even memory could name. The woman in black handed them each a key. Not metal. Not digital. Something older? One made from apology. The other from promise. These aren't for locks, she said. They're for truth. And then the uncondemned came. Not by hundreds. By thousands. Forms shifting. Voices borrowed from lost relatives. Smiles that never touched eyes. And in front of them, the same figure that had walked through the gate of witnessing. Faceless. Unnamed. Unrepentant. Jensen stepped forward. Why now? The figure tilted its head. Because you showed the world that guilt can be forgiven. So we decided guilt didn't exist. Noel stepped beside him, chest glowing. But memory still does. And in a single breath, they began the ritual. Not a spell. Not a command. A story. One told in reverse. One that began with a world without pain and walked backward, showing every reason pain ever existed. This is not a sentence, Jensen said. This is a remembrance you can't erase. The uncondemned screamed. Not in pain, in identity. For the first time, they felt what they had denied others. Consequence. Not punishment. Not judgment. But the weight of having existed. Even if no one wrote it down. And Sanctum 9 held. The orchard trees grew taller. The black fruit bloomed into light. The gate of witnessing opened both ways. And the third gate, the gate of exclusion, sealed. Not with locks, but with stories. Every visitor who left Sanctum 9 from that day forward carried a memory that wasn't theirs, a moment of guilt that had been healed. The uncondemned? They were not destroyed. They were named. And names are beginnings. Chapter 29, The Archive of the Unburied. Sanctum 9 no longer looked like a prison. The gates remained open. The chapel no longer bore its mask. The orchard was in bloom. Even the Book of Erasure, once a tool of unmaking, now served a different purpose. It recorded names. Not of the guilty. Not of the innocent. Just names. People who once needed to forget. People who chose instead to be remembered. Jensen walked the halls not as a warden, but as a witness. He no longer carried keys. He carried stories. And when someone asked how they might be forgiven, he offered them a seat beside the orchard. "You're not here to erase," he'd say. "You're here to add something." Noel changed too. He stopped aging at some point, or perhaps, time simply agreed to stop counting. He tended the gate of witnessing. He no longer opened it. Now it opened to him. And when visitors passed through, he gave them not judgments, but questions. What did you bury? Who do you miss? What did the world say you couldn't grieve? They'd answer. And the answers grew new trees. Then one day, a girl arrived with no questions. Only a stone. Polished black. No markings. She handed it to Jensen without speaking. He turned it over. Inside it, not etched, not inked, was a memory. And it was his. But not one he remembered. The orchard grew silent. The wind stopped. And the book flipped to a sealed page. On it, The Unburied. Jensen's hands trembled. He turned to the woman in black. She paled. "It's the last place the Hollow Warden touched," she said. "It buried something no one dared exhume. A memory not of guilt, but refusal." They followed the girl out past the orchard. Beyond the orchard was a hill. And inside the hill was a vault. No keyhole. No handle. Just a stone slab with 7 cracks. And a message. "Do not remember this." Jensen laid the black stone in the center. It sank. The vault clicked. Opened. Inside, silence. Not quiet. Dead silence. Even Noel stepped back. "It's not just forgotten," he whispered. "It's never been seen." The chamber within was lined with chairs. Dozens. Each one holding a mask. Each one carved from different materials: bone, cloth, wood, dust. Each one facing a mirror. All the mirrors reflected nothing. And at the center, one final chair. Empty. Waiting. Jensen approached. "This is where the Hollow Warden was born, isn't it?" The woman in black nodded. "Not from cruelty. Not from law. From a refusal to let go. The first time the world decided grief couldn't be allowed to breathe. So it made a mask. Jensen Saturday. Not because he wanted to. Because he had to. And when he did, the mirrors lit up. Each one showed a different version of him. Jensen as a monster. Jensen as a boy. Jensen executing someone who begged for a second chance. Jensen holding Caleb's hand and walking away. The final mirror didn't show him at all. It showed everyone he never saved. And it whispered, "You may forgive the guilty. You may remember the forgotten. But what will you do for the unburied, the grief that was never allowed to exist?" The chamber filled with windless motion. The orchard above withered, briefly. Then bloomed again, twice as strong. The Book of Erasure shut itself. On its cover, the etched words changed for the final time. The Book of Remaining. Jensen stood. And the chair dissolved. No one would sit there again. Because the Hollow Warden had not been destroyed. It had been grieved. Chapter 30, The Choice to Remember. The orchard was silent. Not dead. Just listening. The air carried no wind, only expectation. Every tree bore fruit now, each one a name. Not just the guilty, not just the innocent, but everyone who had ever chosen to be remembered. Jensen stood at the edge of the hill, watching Sanctum 9 below. It no longer looked like a prison. It no longer looked like a sanctuary. It had become a record, not of law or crime, but of human weight. It was memory, made architecture. Noel sat beside him, still unchanged, still watching. "It's almost time," he said. "Time for what?" Jensen asked. "For the question. The one they're going to ask you." Below, in the chapel, the final pages of the Book of Remaining turned on their own. One by one, they filled with handwriting. All different. Thousands of them. Names. Moments. Regrets. And then, a blank page, with only a single prompt. What will the world remember? Jensen didn't answer right away. He walked the orchard, touched every tree, spoke every name aloud. He visited room 0, now a garden. He looked into the gate of witnessing, now a river. He stood before the mirror that once showed nothing. Now, it showed the faces of those who never had mirrors. And finally, he returned to the altar in the chapel, placed his hand on the book, spoke aloud. "We will remember grief, even when it isn't loud. We will remember guilt, even when it was earned. We will remember innocence, even when it wasn't believed. But above all, we will remember the choice to remember." The book sealed. The chapel doors closed on their own, and Sanctum 9 exhaled. From that moment on, it no longer served as a place to forgive. It became something true. A place for the unspoken weight of being alive. It had no guards, no wardens, only witnesses. Jensen walked out of Sanctum 9 and did not return. He disappeared beyond the orchard. Some say he walked into the gate of witnessing. Others say he laid down beneath Caleb's tree and became part of the roots. Noel stayed behind. He tended to the garden. He greeted the visitors. And when they asked about guilt, he simply said, "That's not why you're here anymore." The world changed slowly, but it changed. Law softened. Punishments faded. Remembrance became part of healing, not a weapon. And the phrase "the Hollow Warden" was no longer spoken with fear, but with reverence. A reminder, not of judgment, but of the cost of forgetting. Epilogue. A child visited Sanctum 9 a decade later. She walked the orchard, touched one fruit, asked a question. Who were the people no one talks about? Noel knelt beside her, smiled. They're in the soil now, and we remember them, even when we can't name them. She nodded. That's nice. Does it hurt? Noel paused, then answered gently. Sometimes. But it's a pain that doesn't need to be punished. Only witnessed.